All right, folks, welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. And this one we've been trying to do now for 4 months, and it looks like it's finally going to happen, barring a power outage here. And who's going to help me do this? Who else? No other than Mr. Davey Cretin. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again, Joey. Hello, everyone.
And as you can see who we're doing today, that's the band.
And you
All
know where
right.
they're from? They're from the UK. Heyo.
All right. Well, give us a quick rundown on the band so people know.
Marillion are a progressive rock band from England. And the members currently, Steve Hogarth on vocals, a little bit of keyboards, guitars, percussion here and there, but mainly vocals. And he writes the bulk of the lyrics. On keyboards, the great Mark Kelly. On guitar, the phenomenal, I almost said Steve Hogarth. Geez, Stephen Rothery. Sorry, two Stevens in the band. Stephen Rothery on guitars. And he is one of my favorite guitar players. He is such an emotional player. He's awesome. Ian Mosley on drums, who's a veteran of the prog rock scene. He played with Trace back in the mid 70s, played in Renaissance in the early 80s, an amazing drummer. And last but definitely not least, Mr. Pete Trowavis on the bass guitar and occasional acoustic and electric guitars. And we want to wish our best well wishes to Pete Trowavis. He just got through a bit of a heart episode, maybe some surgery. So he's recovering. The guys in the band got him, because he's a little guy, they got him a lighter bass because he usually has these big Rickenbacker basses or just heavy bass guitars. So they just gifted him a nice light bass guitar that he could practice and get used to so he doesn't strain himself. So get well soon, Mr. Trowavis. Hard name to say. Great bass player. And I've met all five of these guys. They're great guys. I met them back in the early 90s, a long, long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Former members of Marillion. Of course, we have to mention Fish for the first 8 years or so of the band's career, the vocalist lyricist, the tall Scotsman. I met him too. Really great guy and very humorous. Also, some former members, Brian Jelliman on keyboards, Doug Irvine and Diz Minute on bass guitar, and former drummers Mick Pointer, Andy Ward, who was in Camel, John Martyr, and Jonathan Mover, who played with GTR, all former members of the band. But the current lineup has been together for, wow, over 35 years now. So a long, long time.
Yeah,
That,
1989.
yeah. So that is 35 years exactly. So that is Marillion. And we're going to start off. I'm going to start off with my number 18. Now, this was a huge task. That's why it took me a while to get ready. A while ago, I fell out with the band, unfortunately, not personally, but just with their music. They put out a record that just I couldn't get into at the time. And I lost interest in the band for a number of years. So I don't call that the band's wilderness years, but my wilderness years. So a lot of the stuff towards the bottom of my countdown, I've been replaying and getting into recently, and they are better records than I first thought. So I was wrong in saying, oh, that record that got me out of the band, it's a horrible record. I actually found 3 songs on it I really like, but more on that in a minute. So starting out with my number 18 record, this is the one I've played a bunch of times because Joey wanted to do this months ago, and I needed time to re-familiarize myself with the later part of the catalog. This is just the one album that doesn't hit me, and I think it gets good towards the end. Coming in at number 18, Somewhere Else. Tracks 8, 9, and 10. The Wound, the lyrics are a little, but I like the music, and it just has a great build. The Last Century for Man, and Faith, the last 3 songs, 8, 9, and 10. I think the album ends well. And a lot of records, to me, are usually front loaded, the best songs at the beginning. So I like the end of this record. Hopefully, with more listens, I'll get into it more. Coming in at number 17, the record years ago that got me away from the band for a little while. And I hope I could pronounce the title. Anarachnophobia is the album. This album created crowdfunding. Marillion do not get the credit that they deserve for this. Radiohead somehow, because they're a bigger band worldwide, the bigger name, everyone knows Radiohead, they got the credit for it, but it's actually Marillion that started crowdfunding with this record. So the songs on it that I like, that I never liked in the past, the first track, Between You and Me, is a really good song.
Mhm.
Map of the World, and the last song, long title, If My Heart Were a Ball, It Would Roll Uphill. I think that's very interesting instrumentally, and each guy shines on that song. So that's what I like. The album ends in very good style. Coming in at number 16, a double record. So even though we're ranking 18 records, it's really 20 records because they have two double albums. This is one of them. Happiness is the Road, Volume 1 and 2. Songs I like from both records: This Train is My Life, Woke Up, Trap the Spark, A State of Mind has a great ending. The Man on CD2, The Man from Planet Marzipan, and last song I really enjoy, Asylum Satellite 1. So that's my number 16. Coming in at number 15 from a little over 10 years ago, Sounds That Can't Be Made. Songs I like from this album: Pour My Love, Invisible Ink, Lucky Man, and the last epic track, The Sky Above the Rain. I like this record. I just don't think it's aged as well. I think I liked it more when it first came out. So those are my bottom four. Not horrible records, just my least favorite in a giant catalog that spans over 40 years now, basically.
Yeah, giant catalog is right. Well, I'm probably going to get a lot of, it's going to take a lot of hits for this one. My number 18 is one that's going to shock probably the majority of the fan base, but for me, everybody has their own thing about the albums, and I just cannot get into this album. That's why it's listed for me at number 18. No matter what I do, I try everything. It's none other than Fugazi from 1984. Yeah, exactly. Um, it's just the only song I really like and could really stand behind is Assassin. Other than that, the rest of the album just sounds dated. The keyboards sound dated. The tracks are really long for the most part, and I just nothing catches me. Nothing reaches out and grabs me. That's the
Not
reason
even
why.
Punch, not even Punch and Judy.
Nope, not even Punch and Judy. I actually just listened to that before we came on here today, and I still just can't get into this album. And my brother had it. He used to play the heck out of it because before I got into Marillion, he got into him, and he's the one that kind of got me into him with Misplaced Childhood. And then from there, which was the follow-up album to this one. Um, but I think once I saw him live for the first time, that's when I really started to appreciate this band. So that's more about that throughout. But number 18 for me, the 1984 Fugazi, which just doesn't give me anything. It's one of the few US, all the top four albums, US albums charted. But this one just doesn't do it for me. And that's going to take me to my number 17, which is one you mentioned. So we're kind of in the same path on this one. That would be Happiness is the Road, 2008. I went to the tour for this because they did the Montreal fan club thing, which, as you can see, Montreal weekend. And they played the album for us, and it was pretty cool to hear it live. Um, but hearing it live and hearing it on record, not exactly the same thing sometimes. I think the best track on the whole album is Woke Up, which is one that you mentioned. And believe it or not, we're pretty much hitting it right on the nail with this one together. This Train is My Life is another standout, Trap the Spark. And the only other one that I had as an honorable mention was Happiness is the Road, the title track. Produced by Michael Hunter and Marillion. It just, considering it was a double album, it just seemed like there was a lot of filler on it for me. Nothing that really, other than those songs that I mentioned, it just didn't really stand out like a regular Marillion album usually does. And they made it kind of quick. It followed within a year of Somewhere Else, which was kind of surprising that they made an album that quick because they were usually on a path of making one album every 2 to 3 years. So I don't know the story behind it all, but number 16 also, and that leads into number 16, which was Somewhere Else for me, 2007, also produced by Michael Hunter. Um, Not much on here that I really can stand behind. It really stands out. Thank You, Whoever You Are is the main track that I like. And then Faith, I thought was a good song. But other than that, this Somewhere Else just took me somewhere else. Just didn't quite cut it. And we went up to 15, so I'm going to leave you with my number 15 before I hand it over back to you, and that's going to be none other than Marillion.com. Just an album I just never really got much into over the years. Um, I liked Rich. I liked Tumble Down the Years. It was actually produced with Marillion, and Steven Wilson was involved in the production here. Um, but for some reason, it just didn't quite cut it for me. It's the follow up to Radiation. Number 15, Marillion.com.
Okay. And I will take over with my number 14, which is the aforementioned Radiation. And I like Radiation. I think there are a lot of good songs on it. Under the Sun, The Answering Machine, 3 Minute Boy, These Chains, The Epic Cathedral Wall, not to be confused with Judas Priest's Cathedral Spires, which I often mix those two names up, and the last track, which is mellow and then comes into its own, A Few Words from the Dead. This album, I think, alienated a lot of fans because rather than being in the progressive vein, it's more sort of in the Radiohead vein. And they even covered Fake Plastic Trees, a Radiohead song, as a B-side. They do a really good version of it. Hogarth sings his tushy off on that one. Even though this album is inspired by the alternative rock movement, I think it's a good record. Not great, but it's a good record. Coming in at number 13, the one you previously mentioned, Marillion.com. I always liked this record from the get-go. I think the title, Marillion.com, dates the record, just like when Jethro Tull put out about the same time, jtull.com. It dates it to the late 90s, early 2000s. But Built-in Bastard Radar, love that song. Excellent song. Interior Lulu, you mentioned Tumble Down the Years. Rich is really good, very catchy. And the first song, A Legacy, those are probably my favorites from this album. Moving on to number 12, their most recent album from 2022, I think. Yes, March 2022. And that is An Hour Before It's Dark. Now, the most recent Marillion records, I think, are very dense, and they take a lot of listens to get through. Plus, when you play them on streaming, a lot of the times, these epic songs, these 10 to 20-minute songs, are broken up into 5 or 6 parts. So it sort of takes me out of it a little too. Be Hard on Yourself, the opening track is good. And then the 2 epics that end the album, Sierra Leone and Care. I need more time with this. I think if I listen to it more, it might climb on my ranking a little. And then coming in at number 11, which some might think is low, but it's another double record, very dense, but it has a lot of great songs. Marbles, very good record, extremely good record. And I saw them play a lot of songs. The last time I saw Marillion in 2010 in Manhattan, they did a bunch of songs from this album, including Neverland, which was great live. And that's probably the standout track for me. A lot of other good songs, The Invisible Man, Fantastic Place, Ocean Cloud. So I like all the epics on the record, the ones that are like 12 to 20 minutes. And for the shorter, slightly shorter songs, Don't Hurt Yourself and You're Gone, I think a good, catchy, more in the pop rock vein songs. So that's my number 11, Marbles. Very dense double album.
Okay. So getting back into my rankings here. For number 14, I've got the album that was just recently released in 2022 is that album, number 14. Be Hard on Yourself, I list as the best song. Murder Machines is another one that stands out for me. Once again, produced by Marillion and Michael Hunter, who seems to be involved in a lot of the latter catalog here. They did a lot of weird things for this album, which was pretty cool, actually. To promote the record, several London black cabs were decorated with the album's artwork, and free rides were given if the customer mentioned a password, which was the album's title. And that promotion ran from March 4th through 14th, which probably helped get it up there on the charts there in London for sure. That was one of their highest charting albums ever in London.
Number two.
Yeah,
Peaked at number two in England.
yeah. So that's pretty interesting. Um, so that's what we're looking at on that one. And once again, I think, it's a newer album and there's a lot to really listen to it here. It's not like this isn't the Marillion back when Steve Hogarth first started with the band, where they were trying to go for more catchy singles, airplay, stuff like that. The band is totally on a whole different level now compared to where it was. I don't think you're ever going to see them really come out with that hit single that everybody's kind of really expecting, like a Kaylee type thing. It just ain't gonna ever happen again for these guys, no matter what they do. And they're happy about that because they don't try to write a song
Mhm.
like that. I mean, if they really try to write a song like that, then maybe it would happen. But and we know they got capabilities to do it because they've made a lot of great songs especially on the first couple albums of the Hogarth era. That could have definitely gotten real big had they had the promotion behind them. But sadly, that's where we're at with that. So an hour before dark is number 14. We're gonna go with my number 13 is gonna be the aforementioned Radiation. This is the album where, since I had started getting really into Marillion, I would say with the Hoga H came aboard. Um, this was the first album where I thought was a dud. You know, every album up to this point that he did, even though they took some chances with some of their catalog, which we'll mention as we get further into it here. This is where they really hit a brick wall to me, and it just isn't as solid of an album. I mean, you mentioned exactly pretty much the songs. These Chains is probably my favorite song on the album, and that's a really good song. Under the Sun kicks it off. That's a good song. 3 Minute Boy, which is another one that they play in concert quite a bit, so they really enjoy that one. But I don't know. There's a lot of stuff on here that just doesn't resonate with me that well. That's the only thing I can say about it. Once again, it was produced with Stuart Every. He was around in that time era, and it just nothing to really write home about on that album, unfortunately. And I really wanted to like that album too. I really did. It's just never really did it for me. And now we're going to go to the album that everybody thinks is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I just haven't found that to be my case. That's why it's number 12, and that's Fear. When that album came out, everybody was saying, "Oh, this is the best Marillion album ever." You know, you heard a lot of that when it first came out. Um, it's a good album, which is why it's number 12 instead of 18. It's not a great album. It's good. It's listenable. Tracks are long. They have a lot of parts to them. There's a lot of great music on here. Um, the Levers, definitely a standout for me. El Dorado, another one. It was produced by Michael Hunter. But once again, I just don't see what a lot of other people probably see in this album. I would guess a lot of people have it a lot lower and they rank it as a higher album in the catalog under the H era. But for me, it's going to fall into number 12. So, and then my last one before we crack the top 10 is going to be Sounds That Can't Be Made. I believe you mentioned that one. Um, Came out in 2012, produced by Marillion and Mike Hunter. Um, For My Love, one of the definite standout track on the album. Um, and then from there, I would say for an honorable mention, Power is good. Pour My Love, Pour My Love is the one that we talked about there. And Sky Above the Rain's an interesting song, clocking in at 10 minutes. A lot of long songs on this album. There's three of them that are 10 minutes plus. So it's definitely not a short album time-wise, but it just doesn't really have like a real good flow to it for me. Where did you say it ended up on yours?
15.
15. Yeah. See, so we're similar. I got mine at 11. Yours was at 15. So it's definitely not a highly regarded album of the catalog, but it's definitely not the worst. So there,
Correct.
so there you have it. Number 11, sounds that can't be made.
Okay, coming in at number 10, I Have Fear, F Everyone and Run, it stands for, or Bleep Everyone and Run. I think this is a really good album. Of course, you mentioned there's two of the three songs I was going to highlight: El Dorado, which is an epic; The Levers, you mentioned, another epic; and the last track, The New Kings, I really enjoy. Those are my three favorites. And this record came out in September of 2016, and it reached number 4 on the UK charts. Of course, it wasn't on the charts here, but they haven't had a record certify overseas since their fifth album, Season's End. They chart almost every album in England, but they don't certify. They're one of the biggest cult bands in the world. That's what I would say about Marillion. They're a huge cult band. So that's my number 10, Fear.
And to carry on what you just mentioned there, I think if anybody has never seen the band live and just went to the show based upon our album rankings, they're going to think, "Oh, wow." But I'll tell you, that's a band that really brings it live, and I think it would leave you in a whole different it would leave the band in a whole different light, especially for somebody who's not familiar with them and has never seen them. I mean, that's where they really shine is in concert. There's no doubt
I
about it.
agree.
No doubt about it with H. There's just no doubt. So definitely we recommend that if you ever get a chance to see them. I know they don't get a chance to play here much because of the whole visa thing, but try to catch a Marillion weekend, and they always seem to play in Montreal. That's a good place to try to see a show because that venue is cool and they do a lot of cool stuff during those Marillion weekends. So that's definitely the place to see them. All right, so getting back into the top 10. Number 10, 2004, none other than Marbles. I was surprised it was this high up, but then when I look and see what's below it, I go, "Oh, that's why." But I love Marbles. Don't get me wrong; a great album. Great, great. This was a great tour. One of the last times they got to play a full tour here before I think they came in 2016, I believe it was, somewhere around there. They don't make it to the States too much, and that's always sad to see. But like you said, Neverland, what a great, fantastic song. Other than that, the album, Don't Hurt Yourself, You're Gone. Those are two standouts. Fantastic Place, and it's got a lot of interludes with Marbles 1, Marbles 2, Marbles 3, and Marbles 4 that kind of start off the songs. They're kind of like preludes. Um, Trying to think of that. The Damage, yeah, that's another one that's really nice, fantastic guitar riff in that song. Uh, just a solid album, definitely. For if you're looking at latter day Marillion albums to try, I would definitely recommend this one first because it's definitely well worth it.
I agree.
All right.
Coming in at number 9, from, I have everything on different pages, unfortunately, June of 1991. This peaked at number 7 on the UK charts, but was their first album not to certify over there. Holidays in Eden at number 9. And although there's a lot of pop on this album, which the record company EMI said, we need a hit, we need a hit. So they have a lot of mellow, acoustic type, not heavy songs. There are some great songs. I love Splintering Heart, the first track.
Oh,
The Party is excellent. Dry Land, I think, is my favorite, which is an old H song from his previous band, How We Live. That's a really good, catchy song. And the ending trilogy of This Town, The Rake's Progress, and 100 Nights. So the album starts great and ends great. And I took a road trip with my friend Andy. We saw them in New York City. And I think Dream Theater opened up at that show, or it could have been the tour before. We also saw them in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we went down to Washington, D.C. to see them. So we sort of followed them around a little on this tour, Holidays in Eden. That is my number 9.
Nice. Yeah, that was probably one of the last times they really got a chance to go to a lot of these places. So whenever you're even within driving distance of a show, you definitely want to check it out because they didn't, especially nowadays, because who would have thought after that they just haven't played around here much at all.
It's too
All right.
much money for them to come to America and
Yeah.
Canada too.
Yeah. Well, they could usually sneak by in Canada more so than here. Here's where the visa problem really lies. That's why they do the weekends up in Montreal. So,
Bigger
all right.
fan base there too.
Oh yeah. All right. So number 9, 1983, the debut, produced by Nick Tauber, none other than Script for a Jester's Tear. Solid debut album. You know, what can be said about it? The title track is definitely the masterpiece. And if you want to count a second masterpiece, part two, you're going to say Garden Party, which is a song that even today they'll still pull out every now and then and play with H singing on it, even though, obviously Fish was on the original album. Uh, just another great He Knows You Know, another song that was a standout. There weren't a lot of songs on the debut, only 6 songs, and there was a they around this time, I believe did record Market Square Heroes, which was another famous song that was known as a B-side, but that was another great song. They made a lot of good songs in this era, but some of them never saw the light of day on an actual album until they came out with like the B-sides themselves, or if you bought the single of a song, then some of those good songs ended up being on there. So, that's what we're looking at right there. Script for a Jester's Tear, number 9.
Okay, my number 8, and I actually have a visual aid for it. Ooh. My number 8 comes from June of 1995, reaching number 16 on the UK charts. It is their 8th album. It is Afraid of Sunlight. And I do have the double remastered disc.
Mm-hmm.
And the booklet is upside down inside. It has a lot of B-sides, demos. The remastering is good, except a lot of the bass and I think the drum, if you turn up the volume, it gets distorted with all these Marillion remasters. If you make it too loud, just when you hear the drum, and maybe it's the bass drum, the bass guitar, a combination of both of them, there's just a little bit of distortion on the remasters. So that's one qualm I have, although it has a lot of great bonus tracks. On this album, it's all about fame and fortune. And I like a lot of the lyrics on here. Gazpacho, sort of about the O.J. Simpson case at the time when this came out. The song Beautiful, the first single from the record, is a great melodic rock song, pop rock song, with some nice playing and singing by H. Steve Hogarth. Afraid of Sunlight, the title track, my favorite song on the record. Amazing song, great guitar solo by Stephen Rothery on that song. And the last song, King, which is about Kurt Cobain, John Lennon, just a lot of famous people all mixed up in a stew about the perils of fame and fortune. And I saw this tour in New York City. It was an excellent show at the time. They hadn't toured for their previous record, Brave, so it was nice to see them on this tour. That's my number 8, Afraid of Sunlight from 1996, or is it 5? 1995, sorry.
Yep. All right. My number 8 is none other than Anarachnophobia, 2001, produced by
Wow,
Dave
that's high.
Dave Megan. You didn't think it would be this high, huh?
Nope.
That's a good album. Maybe it's one of those ones you just got to listen to a little bit more. I don't know, but for me, I've always loved it. Especially when around that era of time, we never really got a chance to see them because they didn't really come around. It was like 7 years drought. We had like a 7 year drought of being able to see the
Wow.
band live at that point, unless you went overseas and saw them in England or something like that. So, but anyhow, 2001 best track in my estimation, no doubt about it. Map of the World, a great song that they don't play it too often these days, but they did play it at one of the conventions. And that was one of those ones where they didn't play the full album, so it wasn't like they were cheating. So they actually did a song from each year and they started backwards. It was a really cool one. That was one night where they did that. They started off and did that. That was pretty cool. Another highlights for honorable mention between you and me, which I think you mentioned on it. That was one of your
Yes.
highlights there. And then of course there's Quartz, which features a great, fantastic guitar work by Mr. Rothery there. And When I Meet God, that's a unique song. That takes some listening, but I think the more times you hear it, it may be something you might actually appreciate down the road. And even though it's 11 minutes and the longest song on the album, one of the standouts for me is This Is the 21st Century. So that's another one that stands out from this album for me. I feel it's one of the albums that kind of got lost in the shuffle. I think had we been able to see a tour for it, I think that would have helped out more. Being able to see the songs live sometimes help, form a different opinion as opposed to if you didn't see the tour and you didn't get to experience the new songs. Rush was famous for always putting in like 5 or 6 new songs every show, no matter which album they toured for. And I think that really, in hindsight, looking back on it, that was big. That helped me like a lot more Rush albums that maybe if I didn't get to experience the concert, then I would have less appreciation for a specific album. But yeah, this one is definitely solid for me at number 8.
Okay. My number 7 is a record I love, except for one track, I would say. This is their 9th studio record from April 1997. It peaked at number 27 in the UK, and it's This Strange Engine. And I won't mention every song, but Man of a Thousand Faces is great. Saw them do that live on this tour, 80 Days, great pop rock commercial type catchy song. Estonia is a beautiful song, and that lift into the chorus is amazing, and it gets me every time. I love Estonia. Probably my favorite song from the record. An Accidental Man is good, some nice keyboard work and vocals by Mark Kelly and Steve Hogarth. And the title track is at odds with Estonia for my favorite track from the album. That Mark Kelly keyboard solo on the title track of This Strange Engine is great. And that was probably the highlight of the show when I saw them on this tour in Manhattan. Excellent show. Love this album. Hope for the Future is the weak track on this record. That's the one that reminds me of Tikwa from that sort of Yes album. That's not a Yes album. Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe from the late 80s. It has that Caribbean vibe, and I don't think it gels well with Marillion. So Hope for the Future is the song that might keep this down a peg or two on my ranking. So number 7, This Strange Engine.
All right. My number 7 comes to us from 1994. And this was the follow-up to none other than Holidays in Eden. So it took them a while, as everybody was aware, if you follow the band. It was the third album with H at the helm. None other than Brave. All right, so Brave was one of the, it was kind of like really taking a chance. It said he even listed Hogarth as saying, we lost a lot of fans on Brave. I think the only reason why they really lost a lot of fans on Brave was the fact that you took 3 years to make another album. That didn't help, because that's about the time when grunge hit. So people found something else to go to. You might have lost a lot of fans because of your direction that you went, I don't believe that because I believe Brave is a solid album, and I do believe this is definitely just like they say in the liner notes. It's one of those albums where you got to listen to it with the lights off to really appreciate it, and you got to know the kind of little bit about the story of the background of it. But you hit it on the head with some of the things that you said about it. Well, you didn't say anything about this one yet, did you?
No, not
All
yet.
right, I'm getting mixed up here. I'll edit this part out too. I'm gonna be editing all night. All right, so just a quick rundown on a few of the tracks that I like. Obviously, we have The Great Escape, which is probably to me the highlight of the album. Alone Again in the Lapse of Luxury is another standout. And the song that really brings it all home for me is the way the album ends. Nothing like listening to Made Again. And if you listen to the lyrics, you can understand what it's all about. And produced by Dave Meegan once again. He was involved in a lot of these albums. I believe that was actually the first album that he was involved with the band. So that's what I got for mine. What do you got for your next
And to
one?
piggyback on that,
Yeah,
Brave is my number 6.
nice.
This is a great album from start to finish. Brave came out in Feb 1994, reached number 10 on the UK charts. Of course, it didn't chart here, unfortunately. It was definitely a risky album in 1994 to put out a concept record, a full concept record. And I think there's a lot of great songs on here with amazing playing from Steve Rothery on guitar and Mark Kelly on keyboards. Living with the Big Lie is a great rock song, hard rock song. Runaway, another excellent song. And both these tracks featured great guitar work from Rothery. He's one of my favorite guitar players. He's in the David Gilmour, Andy Latimer from Camel Mode, where they do more with less notes than a lot of the flashy guys with a zillion notes
Mm.
on the guitar. It's just the emotion that they wring out of the necks of these guitars. Amazing. Steve Rothery on this record, basically on all Marillion records. The Hollow Man, I think, is a beautiful ballad, and there's some great lyrics on that song. Whoa. Alone Again in the Lap of Luxury, you mentioned. Love that song. And I like when they did it live, how all of a sudden Mark Kelly started doing backing vocals
Mm.
and he just belted out that part. I could be anywhere right now if I only had the strength to leave this house, I think is the line. Just the way he belts that out. Awesome seeing it live.
Yeah.
And of course, The Great Escape. And Rothery's guitar work on that
Mm.
song is amazing. And it's transcended. Once again, that lift at the end of that song, Rothery going off on the guitar with Hogarth singing. I think it's one of the highlights in the whole Marillion catalog, that song. Amazing song. So my number 6 album is Brave. It's a great concept record. Very dense, hard to get into, but it's definitely worth taking the time to do it.
Okay. Yeah, so we were right around there together on that one. We'll see about this one here, the next one. Number 6, 1985, Misplaced Childhood. Um, we end up being Fish's the third album with Fish and his second last. Produced by Chris Kimsey. Um, what can be said about this album? A lot of people might hold this one a little bit higher than where I've got it, but at number 6, I think it falls right where I kind of expected it to. For me, I mean, I like it, I love it actually, but I just like the other ones above it just a smidge more. That's all. Kaylee, Lavender. What can be said about that? The album kicks off in fine style. You got the Heart of Lothian, and it's unique concept on how they did this album. And the cool thing was when first time we ever got to see him, me and my brother, we went to Rush on the Power Windows tour. And Marillion was only a special guest for a select number of shows during that tour. And one of them happened to be the one where they came in Buffalo. And they played the whole Misplaced Childhood side 1, which was pretty cool in concert. Because they only had like 45 minutes to play. So it was pretty cool how they played, Pseudo Silk Kimono into Kaylee and the Lavender, Bittersweet, Heart of Lothian. Just a great set. They really highlighted the right part of the album there in concert, and I think that's how they were able to win over a lot of the fans there on that one. It's just a shame that that really turned out to be the highlight of Marillion in United States. That was their biggest album, still remains their biggest selling album in the United States. They got the most airplay on it in the United States as their only single Kaylee to even chart on the charts at all. And yeah, I remember them playing it on the radio a lot up here in Buffalo. I don't know if you guys got a lot or not, but it did pretty well, and that song really helped push that album pretty good. Um, so Misplaced Childhood is definitely for me my number six.
Okay. My number five, we're into the top five now. This is the first album with Mr. Steve Hogarth, aka H, on vocals from September 89, reached number 7 in the UK charts and went gold in the UK. Season's End is my number five. Great album, basically start to finish. King of Sunset Town, Easter, Season's End, The Space, the last song on the proper album. And I just want to give some love to the B-side, The Release. Great melody, great keyboard work from Mark Kelly. I always thought The Release should have been on the record instead of maybe the first single, but it wasn't. This was my first time seeing the band. I'll tell my story about what happened when Misplaced Childhood came out later on in the show when I get to that record. But this was my first time seeing them. Actually, this is when Dream Theater opened. And Dream Theater had just fired their singer at the time, Charlie Dominici, and they got this offer to open up for Marillion at the Ritz in New York City. And they went back to Dominici and said, hey, we got this chance to open up for Marillion. You mind coming back just to do this one show? And he said, yeah, as a favor to you guys, I'll do the show. Unfortunately, Charlie Dominici, their original singer, passed away late last year. He's about 15 years older than most of the guys in Dream Theater. So I saw Dream Theater opening up for Marillion on the Season's End tour at the Ritz in New York City. And it was an excellent show. Both bands were great.
All
So
right,
that is my
nice.
number five, Season's End.
All right. Well, my number five is one you mentioned a little ways back there, and that's 1997's The Strange Engine. Um, Obviously the follow-up to Afraid of Sunlight. Not quite as strong as Afraid of Sunlight, but a decent follow-up, as you will see, and you get the whole picture here. Um, I always loved 80 Days. It's all about the road, touring on the road. That's what it was written about, and great song. And the lyrics are just amazing. And then, of course, Man of a Thousand Faces, which is the opening track. What a great song. That opens up. They opened up a lot of shows with that song during that time frame, and fantastic song, no doubt. One Fine Day is a little different, but that's another standout. And you mentioned about Estonia, which we got to experience it really awesome in Cleveland one time. Um, they opened up with it,
Wow.
and who comes out and plays with them on it? None other than Mr. John Wesley. So that was just phenomenal to see Wes out there cranking this song with the band. That was a great, great show. And that was cool because that was during this tour, which was this Strange Engine tour, and it was one of the first tours to ever be financed entirely by fans. They could not afford to come over to the U.S., and the internet was kind of just getting popular. I mean, me and my brother used to have to go to like Kinko's to sign into the internet because at that point we didn't have any home service. So we went to go over there, and that's how we found out about this whole Marillion North American Tour Fund. So very interesting time at that point because here they are. They just got done with Afraid of Sunlight. They come out with this brand new album, This Strange Engine. The record company, I believe, folded, and they just didn't have no touring support to go out on the road and tour for it. So a couple of
Yes.
the fans got together and started this tour fund, and boom, it rolled. And all of a sudden, before you know it, they had all this money, and the band just couldn't say no at that point because all the money was pledged out, and it was for the band to come out and play some shows. So they did like a limited tour US and they did a couple Canada. I know they for sure they did Toronto because I went to the Toronto show. And yeah, what a great time that tour was. I ended up seeing four shows on that tour
Wow.
and that was just awesome because they were playing all different sets and then what they did because they didn't want to make it look like that the fans, they wanted to reward the fans that for all their hard work and supporting and getting all that money raised up so they could come over here and tour. They promised that they were going to record a couple of the shows and they would pick which they feel was the best one and they were going to give everybody a CD. And that turned out to be none other than Marillion in Rochester, New York, which was the second night of the tour and the first I went to that was one of the shows that I got to see. So it was very nice to see. One of the shows that I got to see was one of the ones that they recorded and gave away as a free gift to anybody that donated to the tour fund. So that was
Sweet.
definitely, yeah, I mean, who could do that nowadays, It's just amazing how dedicated that fan base was back then. I'm sure we could probably do it again if we really wanted the band to come here bad enough, but I don't think that they would accept it this time. But it's a whole new different game out there now with the touring because of the visa situation. You used to be able to sneak by with the regulations and rules have really changed with the visas, and that's one of the reasons why the band has a hard time coming here so often is like they can't come like all the time like they used to, unfortunately. So that's what my yeah. So my number five, This Strange Engine.
Number four for me, their second album from March of 1984 reached number five in the UK and it reached number 209 in America. Went gold in the UK, Fugazi. And I know you don't like it. You couldn't get into it. I think it's a great record. Not perfect, but Assassin, like you said, is great. I love Punch and Judy. I think that's catchy and it's just fast and it's hard hitting. No pun intended. Jigsaw, my friend Andy, whom I went to see when we followed Marillion around on the Holidays in Eden tour a little bit. Jigsaw is Andy's favorite Marillion song. Incubus is gorgeous. And Mark Kelly's piano work, about 2/3 of the way through, just him and Fish on the vocal, Fish's lyrics. Another highlight for me in the Marillion catalog is Incubus, just a gorgeous, gorgeous song. And Fugazi, the title track, just angry. And the B-side from this era that's on B-Sides Themselves, the album you mentioned before, Cinderella Search, not the single edit that someone accidentally put on B-Sides Themselves, which is 4 and change, but the full 6-minute version. That's the version to hear of Cinderella Search. And it's a great freaking song. Should have been on the record in place of maybe Emerald Lies or She Chameleon, because I love Cinderella Search. So my number 4 album, Fugazi.
All right, getting down to the wire here now. All right, so that's probably the only real vast difference we have so far. That one's definitely going to stand out like a sore thumb because of how far where it ended on your list and where it ended on mine. But I stand
4
behind
to
my
18.
yeah
4 to 18 is a huge
yeah.
difference.
I definitely stand behind my ranking of it. I just can't get into it. I mean, I wanted to, I tried, but this album, my number four, caught me, and boy did it ever. 1995. If only we could go back to that era. Produced by Dave Megan, none other than Afraid of Sunlight. What a fantastic, fantastic album. I just love this album. Kicks off with Gazpacho, which is a little unique. And then it goes right into another unique song, Cannibal Surf Babe. Not the greatest Marillion song, but definitely one that kind of stands out for its uniqueness. Let's put it that way.
It's
But
like a Beach Boys pastiche. It's a lot of
yep.
Beach Boys influences in there, from the lyrics to the keyboard sounds. I like Mark Kelly's keyboards on that song.
Oh
Sorry
yeah.
to interrupt.
No, no, you're fine. That's perfect. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's exactly, what I felt about it too. It has like kind of like a 60s classic Beach Boys sound to it in a way. So yeah, definitely that's definitely the way I felt about it too. And I don't know, to me there's hard to say which song is actually the best on this album. I'm going to give you three. Only because that's how these songs are. They're all neck and neck to me. If we have to do a top 10 Marillion song, I don't know how I would do it with
Hard.
these three songs because I almost count them all right along the row here. And obviously, Beautiful is one of them. What a fantastic song. That's the song that really helped get me into this album to begin with. And I'll tell you, the other two songs that I'm going to mention right now, the studio versions weren't exactly they're good. They're really good. But when I first heard the album, they didn't really stand out for me as much until I got to see this performed live. And when I got to see these two songs live, I'm talking about the title track and none other than King. That those are just two fantastic live highlights that it's just amazing to see those two songs live, just like that Neverland type situation. You're in a moment when you're seeing these songs live. And I remember H was crowd surfing in Montreal during one of these. I think it was Afraid of Sunlight. Man, what a fantastic scene that was. They passed him around from the front of the stage almost all the way to the back, and just amazing. The whole song, the whole experience, those weekends. If you ever get a chance to see a Marillion weekend, I definitely recommend it because these things are extra special. And the things they do on those weekends, they play 3 nights in a row. They usually do two albums in there entirely, and then they throw out some kind of a theme night where they just mix in all these great songs throughout their whole career, and it's just well worth it to see one of these things. You'll remember it for the rest of your life. There's no doubt about it. So yeah, that's this album is just those three songs alone on top of the other two that I mentioned are just enough to really make this album really stand out to me in this manner at number 4.
Okay, coming in at number three for me, their debut album from March 1983, Script for a Jester's Tear, reached number 7 in the UK and number 175 in the US. And I should point out all the early Fish era albums, 12 inches, 45s, they have great Mark Wilkinson artwork. And he's known now for working with Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. Mark Wilkinson, great artist, and Marillion's cover art from the early era, from all the 80s stuff, because it includes Season End, top notch stuff, very eye catching. This record went platinum in the UK. And my favorite songs from it, the title cut, like you said, brilliant song. The Web, I love The Web, and Mark Kelly's keyboard work in The Web, top notch. Amazing stuff. Forgotten Sons, and of course, one of the B-sides you mentioned, Market Square Heroes from 1982, that somehow didn't make this record. Sort of like what the Beatles did in the early 60s and the Stones. They had singles that just weren't on the records. They were collector's items. You had to get the 45 or the 12-inch.
Hmm.
But also, besides Market Square Heroes, Grendel, the 18-minute song that sounds a lot like Genesis Supper's Ready, but it's still a great song. It rocks harder, and I love Grendel from the Fish era. So, Script for a Jester's Tear, my number 3 record.
And just to one quick note on that, Grendel is the one song that you'll always hear somebody shout out for, even to this day at a show. They're just
Yep.
dying and hoping that for some reason H would learn it and play it, but
And they're never going to see
usually
that.
is never going to see, unfortunately, unless he throws us some kind of a bone one of these years here. But yeah, great. Yeah, I mean that album didn't go quite as low for me, but I still like it and I still enjoy it. There's no doubt about that. So that's your number three. And mine is my lowest ranking Fish album, which is going to come in at number three, 1987, Clutching at Straws. Wow, what an album. I actually thought this was going to be number one or two. And unfortunately, after listening to my top three back to back to back, just to see, it's still just missed being number two for sure. Chris Kimsey produced it, the final album of Fish's career with Marillion, unfortunately. And it's sad because, a lot of people, they just came out with this album and everybody thought, oh man, this is great. They're gonna get another album and then it's gonna be the one that put them over the top in the United States. And sadly, it's the last album we get with Fish. Did peak on the US charts at number 103, which is their last US album chart ranking. Number two in the UK. But it's all about the songs on the album. And I tell you, man, this album has a lot of songs. I'm not going to highlight every single one of them, but I will say this. Is there a song better than Sugar Mice in the catalog? Well, that's another debate for another episode someday down the road. We'll have to, that's going to be a tough one to rank 10 Marillion songs in order. That is going to be a tough task. I would have to admit that right off the bat. For me, that's going to be really hard. It'd probably take us another 2 years just to decide between which songs are actually the best because there's so many just on my top three albums that could be on there, and that's not even counting the rest. But Sugar Mice is definitely the standout for me, and then the other ones are the two that kind of go together that Marillion always seems to play together in concert. Warm Wet Circles, That Time of the Night, and I'll tell you, got to see they had a fan club party in Pittsburgh on the This Strange Engine tour where you had to register for it and sign up for it, and you got to see the band do like a sound check, and then they had a question and answer session. Then you got to see them and eat with them. There was like a meal included in it in this big venue called Graffiti Showcase, which is no longer in existence. And I'll tell you, man, it was just amazing. They did a couple Beatles covers during the sound check. When they first let us in, they were playing Warm Wet Circles That Time of the Night. So that just goes to show you how much of an impact they had right away hearing them start off with that. And just amazing time with this. Uh, it's nice that this material from this album that Hogarth must really like it because they played a lot of songs from this album in the concerts, that he's been in. Obviously, they used to do Incommunicado a lot more frequently until latter years when once H has been in the band a while, they decided they needed to focus more on the newer stuff, so they didn't play as much old stuff. But what can be said about it? That just a great album all the way through, beginning to end. I am still shocked it's number three for me. I don't know why. I'm thinking it's got to be better than my number two, but for some reason, looking back on it, I guess number two, which you'll find out in one more album after you tell us your number two, you'll see what it is. So that's my number three.
I know the two you haven't brought up yet, but I won't say anything. I
Right.
figured it out.
Oh yeah.
And I think Clutching is better than both of them, but that's just my opinion. Coming in at number two, the album you just mentioned, Clutching at Straws.
Ooh.
It was their fourth album, Last with Fish, like you said. I won't do the charts. You did them. It went gold in the UK and gold in Germany.
Interesting.
And I think this is a perfect album. The opening trilogy, which you mentioned two of, Hotel Hobbies, Warm Wet Circles, That Time of the Night, great. Saw them do it on the Season's End tour, and H was great on it. And those are three great songs, a great trilogy to start the record. Sort of like with Holidays in Eden, the trilogy that ends the album. White Russian is a great song, some great pointed political lyrics from Mr. Fish, a.k.a. Derek W. Dick, his real name. Just for the record, the keyboard solo from Mark Kelly, that Fast and Furious solo, love it. And then Sugar Mice, like you said, an amazing song lyrically, musically, and that Rothery guitar solo again, it just gets you every time. One of his best solos. that's another great show, picking Rothery's best guitar solos. That
Oh,
might
wow.
even be harder than the songs.
You ain't
So at
kidding.
number two, almost my number one. Arguably, you could flip it. It's hard to say, but my head says this is a number one album, but my heart says the other one is number one. So I will be going with my heart. But at number two, Clutching at Straws from 1987.
All right. Very good. All right. So that is your number two. And mine is none other than Holidays in Eden from 1991. Yeah, I think what made this album really, really stand out for me, where it just beat out Clutching. I think it's because of the quality of the songs that I really love from Holidays in Eden. Obviously, this Holidays in Eden was a weird one because it ended up being produced by Christopher Neal, and that was after Chris Kimsey, who was originally slated to produce it, was locked in with the Stones to produce Steel Wheels, so he wasn't available, and they had to make the record. So Christopher Neal stepped in, and I thought he did a real fine job. It's the only album he ever produced with the band, so it's definitely one of the best albums in my estimation of the catalog. But I'll tell you, there's not too much here that stands out as the songs I'm going to mention here, which I don't believe you mentioned too much on these songs when you mentioned this album. The Waiting to Happen, man, oh man, what a fantastic song. You really got to experience that one live to really get the fullness of the song. It's just amazing. But every time I hear this song, I just crank it up. I just love Waiting to Happen. It's just a great song. Splintering Heart, another great one that you did mention. And that one obviously kicked off that tour when they opened up with it, just like they did on the album, which was phenomenal. That was awesome. Cover My Eyes, another gem of the album. That's one of those songs that should have been bigger than what it was. It's always gone over great live for sure. I remember we got to see it in that Cleveland show that I mentioned about Wes coming out on Estonia. Well, they ended with Cover My Eyes, and man, tore the place down at the Odeon in Cleveland, Ohio. What a fantastic way to end the show there. And because they did Sugar Mice as the first encore, went right into Cover My Eyes. And that was the cool thing about that tour was they were mixing the sets all up. It was all different songs and all different, they were focusing in on this Strange Engine stuff, but they still managed to put in all these other great favorites that everybody enjoyed. No One Can, that's another great song that I've seen live many times throughout their career. And Dryland, of course, was the song that H brought into the band from his old band. Remember the name of them?
How We Live.
There
I
you go.
mentioned them.
Nice. Yeah. So that was one right there that he brought in with him from there, which is another, fantastic song. Um, did you ever hear the original version?
Oh, yeah, I have the CD somewhere.
Oh, okay, great, great. Yeah. So, they did good on that one. And then, like you said, what can be said about, this town, the Rakes Progress and 100 Nights, the weakest track on the album probably is the title track, really, Holidays in Eden, and that's no slouch to begin with either. I mean, just a solid album from beginning to end. I think that's what did it for me. It sold me. Number two. There you go. Let's hear number one. Drum roll.
My favorite album from Marillion, coming in at number one. I was listening to WNEW FM, the rock radio station in New York City, and I remember Carol Miller, who used to be the female DJ on 95.5 WPLJ, but when they went pop, she eventually moved to WNEW FM, and she played this song. And I heard this song, and I said, whoa, what a great song. That guitar solo, the melody, who the heck is this band? And it was a song called Kaylee by Marillion. That was the first time I ever heard it. It was on WNEW FM. And I remember that she's the one that played it. And I went out and bought the record on vinyl. The same time I bought the double live Triumph album, Stages. I remember it was a TSS on Hempstead Turnpike in Nassau County. I was with my family right before I drove. So I picked it up, and that was my first Marillion album, Misplaced Childhood, from June 85. went #1 in England, 47 here,
Mm.
gold in Switzerland, platinum in Germany, and platinum in the UK. And after this record came out, a lot of girls were named Kaylee. True story. You always hear a lot of the Brits saying that on these talking head YouTube shows. I knew a lot of Kayleys, and it was all the way from this album, Misplaced Childhood. This album was sort of fueled and inspired by an LSD trip that Fish took. And he sort of came up with this story and weaved his own personal life into it. And it shows certain parts of this album seem a bit trippy. Kaylee is awesome. Lavender, Heart of Lothian, you mentioned those. And from side two, Blind Curve. I love that whole Milo section. And I think Fish's lyrics there might be my favorite of his career. Just that whole, I remember Toronto when Milo went down and we sat and we cried on the phone. I never felt so alone. He was the first of our own. Just that whole section is amazing. So my #1 Marillion album, it has to be the first one I ever heard. And The Heart Wants What the Heart Wants, as I've said before, Misplaced Childhood from 1985. And lastly, before I finish up, I did go to see Rush on the Power Windows tour. I didn't drive yet. I went with some friends and we got there and I said to the whoever was sitting next to me, did the opening band, did Marillion play? Yeah, they just finished. You missed them. So I missed seeing Marillion with Fish and I was
Mm.
crushed. And I've been crushed almost 40 years later, 39, almost 39 years later. It's still that I missed. I never saw them with Marillion, Fish with Marillion. I've only seen them on their own separately.
And they were only on a handful of dates. Was that for Madison Square Garden?
I think it was no, it was Nassau Coliseum.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. Did were you just got tied up in traffic, or you just got there, or you
Yeah, I
couldn't?
was at the mercy of someone else driving, so we got
Mm,
there too late.
man.
So all of Rush is set, and that was the first time I saw Rush on the Power Windows tour. They were great, and like you mentioned before, I should add this: Rush did 7 out of 8 songs from Power Windows. The only one they did not do, which is a great deep track, a motion detector,
Uh-huh.
towards the end of side two. 7 out of 8 tracks.
Amazing. Yeah,
Excellent Rush show.
those were the days. If I could go
Oh
back to
yeah,
one concert, that would definitely be one of my highlights because that was my favorite Rush show, even though it wasn't the greatest seat I had for Rush. It was actually the upper deck of the odd, but we had the first row of the upper deck. But the set list was impeccable, and to see Marillion, unbelievable. Not to rub it in or anything. Well, my brother, the reason why he even went was because he was a huge Marillion fan at that time. And then he liked Rush, so it was hand in hand. We went down, got tickets, and we didn't get them right when they went on sale, which is why we had to settle for nosebleeds. But at that time, man, I'm so glad we went to that show, and he still talks about it to this day because that turned out to be the only time he ever got to see Fish with Marillion. We saw Fish solo, but never with Marillion. And well, until just that one show, but it just sucked that a lot of these things we were just a little too young to be seeing them when they actually played a couple other times in town earlier on. That's the only downside. So anyhow, let's get on with my #1, which you probably
I
figured it
know
out.
what it is.
Produced by Marillion along with Nick Davis, none other than the 1989 first album with H, Season's End. Yeah, this is just one of those albums that, when it came out, my brother got it, was playing the hell out of it like usual. A couple of the songs caught me, but it took everybody. It was my dad's birthday that night, so they were coming to the club out by us on the outdoor stage, and a couple guys from work were talking about the show, so I wasn't really initially going to go. And then everybody kept talking about, oh, this is going to be the greatest show you'll ever see in your life, and da 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 da. Da. Sure enough, so I ended up buying a ticket. We all went, and man, what a great time! I believe it still stands as my brother's favorite Marillion show to this date. It's the first time he got to see H. first time we got to see H. And this album, you know, most of the songs were in concert that night. You know, Seasons End, great song, my favorite from the album. The Uninvited Guest, Easter, what can be said about that phenomenal song? King of Sunset Town, what they open with, After Me, a unique track because it wasn't on the vinyl or the cassette. Interestingly,
CD only. Yep.
CD only. Yep, and that I love that song, After Me. That was always a standout. The only song that I really never really got into on this album was Berlin, but I have much more appreciation for it now than I did. For some reason, it took me a while to turn the corner on that one. But you know, Hooks and You was a unique song too. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, that doesn't sound like Marillion," and that took a lot of heat, that song. But they had a video for it. But you know, it's one of those songs that, you know, I always thought it was one of those songs that the band would always play live because, you know, it was a single and they always played it in the early few times I saw H with the band. And then all of a sudden it just disappeared right out. The only time they would play it is if they did the album in its entirety at some of those conventions that I saw. Another standout too I want to mention real quick before we move on is The Space. Uh, Phenomenal song. Definitely and one of the highlights of the album too that doesn't get talked about as much as you would think just because of the other songs, you know. And Holloway Girl's another one I want to mention. I know a lot of people don't really like that song for some reason, but for me, I've always enjoyed that one, Holloway Girl.
I like it.
Yeah, well, that's good. But a lot of people don't, which is kind of weird because it's a good song for sure. So there you got my number one, Season's End, all the way from 1989.
Could I show some stuff off fast?
Yeah, you got some unique stuff you said, huh?
I have the double greatest hits
Oh,
called The Best of Both Worlds.
yeah, yeah.
And one side, it's an import made in Great Britain, the sticker right there. One CD is all the Fish era, and then the second CD is all the Hogarth era. And it's from the first four albums with Fish and the first four albums with Hogarth. So this is a very cool double disc set. Nice booklet, great artwork. Then I got another import, a 4 CD set, Marillion the Singles. This is volume 2, 89 to 95. So this is all Hogarth era singles and their B-sides.
Mm.
Not very easy to see, but
The
it's a
release
lot
on
of
there?
tracks. Pardon me?
The release, is that on there?
Oh, it must be.
It's a B-side.
Yes, it is. Disc 1, it's there. Amazing song. Then I have a DVD, the recital of the script
Mm.
from the Fish era. And it has live performance and I think some bonus videos. So this is a very cool DVD from back in the day of the Fish era.
What year is it
Then
from?
it's from England. Let's see, Hammersmith Odeon, London, England, April 18th, 1983. So it's
Oh,
from the script for Registes Theater.
the
And
tour.
they do
Okay.
Grendel. Grendel is one of the
Mm.
8 songs.
Aha.
And then from the mid to late 90s, H's
Ice.
solo record, Ice
Yes.
Cream Genius.
Yes. I got that.
What year is this? Oh,
Uh,
97. It's when this
yeah.
Strange Engine came out around
Yeah.
that time. And there's a great song on here called You Dinosaur Thing.
Oh, yeah.
And there's even a great video for it, which reminds me of the King Crimson song Dinosaur from a few years before this.
Huh.
So there's Dinosaur by King Crimson and You Dinosaur Thing by Steve Hogarth, his solo record. I haven't heard
Nice.
this in so long. I dug this out today. I'm going to play this in my car. And that's all I have to show.
All right. Well, that was awesome seeing some of that stuff because I have a little bit. There was another one that they called Six of One, Half a Dozen of the Other, I believe. There's so
Yep,
many great compilations out there. So
yep,
for
there
anybody
are.
not familiar with this band and you don't really want to go through 18 albums, those are things you can look at to kind of give you a quick synopsis of the band. That one is definitely if you want to show it again there, yeah, that's a great one to get for somebody that just wants to learn about the band and get into it. I mean, it's just a great introduction to the band.
A lot
At
of
least
songs too.
yeah, the early
20,
years.
29 songs. You get 29 songs on here.
Yeah, that's a gem. Probably hard to find nowadays, I would bet. Nowadays, it seems like
I'm not
so
sure.
many CDs are out of print now, and it's really hard to get a hold of them. And if you see them anywhere, like on eBay or anywhere, they're like triple the price of what they were when I bought it. It's just I'm so glad that I got a lot of these things when I did. Yeah.
Could I just say a fast thing about the bass player Pete Wavis?
Oh,
He also
yes.
does great work. He's a phenomenal bass player, very underrated. When he plays the Rickenbacker bass, the big bass that Chris Squire used to play, he gets great sound out of it, great tone he has. And I've seen him a bunch of times with a few other bands he's in. Transatlantic, which I think are now defunct after their last album, but they have about half a dozen great albums. And that's with Mike Portnoy, who used to be with Dream Theater, then was out for a number of years, and is now back in Dream Theater. Neil Morse, formerly of Spock's Beard, and Royna Stolt from the underrated The Flower Kings. So that's a
Mm.
great supergroup to look for. And they make old school, old style 70s progressive rock that I would say is more in line with the Fish era than the Hogarth era. So Travis really goes off. He sings some great lead vocals there. He's a really good backing vocalist, and he also is a pretty good lead singer. He does some lead work on the Transatlantic records, and he was also on a couple of records by a band Kino, with featuring ex-members of the band It Bites. So he does some
Mm.
great work on that Kino record. There's one album called Picture,
Hmm.
and that's a great record. It's like pop prog. It's more in the realm of like Supertramp and 10cc. And the first track just friggin' rocks, 9-minute song. And then you get more of the commercial songs after that. Most of the songs are like 3 to 6 minutes, but that first track, the 9-minute song, the title escapes me right now, but that's an amazing prog song with some great keyboard work by John What's His Face from It Bites. His name just flew right out of my head, darn it. And just really quick, I just want to mention my channel on
Hmm.
YouTube, Cretin Classics. And I will have more content coming now that I'm done with this massive Marillion catalog. 18 records, 2 doubles, 20 albums. I've been listening to the whole second half for the past few weeks, and it's a lot to absorb, but it is well worth the time. So thank you, Joey, for turning me back on to that second half of Marillion's career. I appreciate it.
All right, not a problem. Glad to have you on here with me to help me do this because was not an easy catalog to rank.
No.
There's a lot to, like you said, there was a lot to listen to, a lot to try to take in, and it was just it was fun though. It was definitely fun, but time consuming, obviously, to say the least. So, I know we're probably going to do another album ranking show down the road. We're going to try to keep it a little bit shorter of a catalog because there's
Five
still,
records. The one
it's,
we discussed has five
yeah,
records with the other guys. So, and I've played all of those recently too. I squeezed those in because those are shorter albums, but I won't give it away.
okay. All right, sounds good. Well, thank you, everybody, and make sure you subscribe and comment. We want to see some comments, good or bad.
Yeah,
Keep them clean, please.
and you
Uh,
could rank your top five, your top 10, or all 18 if you want.
Exactly. It doesn't have to just be the all of them if you're not familiar with all of them, obviously. They have a lot of, or you can just mention some of the songs that you like from the band, and that's something that we will take the time one of these days and we will rank the songs, which is gonna be a
Nice.
hard thing to do, but I'm game if you are.
Yes.
All right. Signing off. Till next
Thank you for
time.
having me. Take care,
Yep.
everyone. Thanks.
Ranking the albums.